Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Office Add-ins Community Call. I am your host, David Chesnut, and let's take a look at the agenda for today. Joining us today is Juan Balmari, who is going to be doing a recap of some Outlook announcements from the Microsoft Ignite event. Also joining us today is Eric Legault, who's going to be showing a sample that he put together that shows how you can use event-based activation in Outlook to encrypt attachments and more. If you do have any questions as we go along, just type them into the chat and we will work to answer those as we go through the presentations. If there's any questions that we're unable to get to today, we post a blog summary after the call, usually about a week or so afterwards, that will have all of the Q&A with all of the questions and answers in there as well. Also, the call is recorded and will be posted to our Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel shortly after the call, usually within 24 hours. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with Juan. Take it away.
All right, David, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen because I will present a few demos. So hello, everyone. This is Juan Balmori here. I'm a program manager in the Outlook add-ins team. It's great to be here with you today. And I want to share with you, Ignite was last month. I didn't have a chance to participate in the last community call, but in this one, I want to talk to you about some important announcements from the team that happened at Ignite, and I want to make sure that you guys have visibility. The blog post that talks about everything that my team announced at Ignite. I'm going to focus on the Outlook part because I am the Outlook PM. But anyways, so basically during the event, we actually announced two important updates. The first one is that our Mailbox 1.11 requirement set, it's GA. So we're going to talk a little bit more details about what's included here. And then we also announced a super cool feature. I think I already talked with you on this audience about, which is smart alerts. So I can give a demo about it and tell you how can you use it. And then finally, we talk a little bit about how can you combine these two features to create better experiences and allow your users to send better emails. So let's get started. So part one, event-based. Event-based add-ins, for those of you who haven't heard, this is something that my team has been working on a lot in the last year or so. It's basically a technology that enables you to launch an add-in automatically. Subscribe to events, So while the user is composing an email, your add-in can actually launch in specific aspects of it without any user inputs. So this is different from the model that we have today. Well, that I wouldn't say today, but we used to have task panes. You click on a button and the task pane pops, and then only when the task pane is active, your add-in can interact with Outlook. In this case, you can launch your add-in automatically with certain events. So basically at Build earlier in the year, we announced the GA of a few events, but now we are announcing the GA of more of them. So you can build more richer solutions. And by the way, Eric later in the call is going to show you a very real and very cool scenario that is using all these capabilities. So basically, event-based add-ins, again, completely new way to interact with Outlook add-ins. They require no user inputs to be activated. They will basically, your add-in will activate where certain events happen. They are UI-less in operation, so the add-in is launched via event. They are short running. They're supposed to be short running. Well, this is an intent that that the feature has. We don't want to having an add-in running permanently on the background as we used to have in BSTO, because that to some degree degrades the experience a little bit in Outlook. So the idea here is that the event happens and you perform some action, and then the add-in can shut down, right? They are for compose right now. So all the events that I'm going to talk about are in compose mode. So we don't have this yet for reading. And finally, there's going to be obviously no UI disrupting, So everything is going to happen in the background. That doesn't mean that you cannot provide certain points at which users can interact with your add-in, but you cannot pop dialogues and stuff like that. Right? So Well, what's included in the announcement? The announcement is that the Mailbox 1.11 is GA, starting on the build that you see on the screen. You will be able to use these add-ins, which basically, if you install the latest version of Outlook, you should be able to do it in the monthly channels, right? So we added a recipients change event. Every time you change recipients in the to CC or BCC when you're sending an email, you can trigger an event. You can handle an event actually. Every time you attach documents into emails and appointments, and you can also trigger an event. Subscribe to an appointment change or a recurrence change event. It is useful, to update your backends with new times and stuff. And then we also have an info bar dismissed. So one of the ways that you can interact in this new world with your users is by showing notification bars in Outlook, and those can be dismissed. So basically, if the user clicks dismissed, you can handle those events. And finally, given that, again, this is short running, so which means that you don't have permanently an add-in running in the background, but it creates and we'll talk on it in more details about how you can use the session data object. But the idea is that you can have a property bag that you can have access for the lifetime of the composition, so that you can store state across multiple events, right? So and make your add-ins more efficient. So let's talk about enough talking. Let's talk about the demo here. So one of our closest partners are using this technology on the online signature, email signatures. For example, when you're sending an email to external or internal users. So the idea here is that I create a new email. I'm going to switch gears to Outlook, and then, as you can see, I created a new email and I added a signature here. So this is the uncompose event that we shipped a long time ago, right? But now, in addition to that, if I add an email to someone who is internal, the internal signature remains here. But as soon as I will try some external address here. As soon as I add an external recipient, you will see that the signature was changed. And I put it back, and if I remove it, the signature is going to switch back to the internal email. So this is very simple, but you can see it's like your Outlook add-in is seamlessly integrated into the Outlook experience. And this is just one scenario that you can enable. I want you to think about other scenarios that you can implement using this. You will have this event for, again, all the different events that I described previously. And it's really super simple to create an add-in like this. I mean, if you're already creating Outlook add-ins, you know that there's a manifest, which is an XML file that defines how your add-in is going to behave within Outlook. So basically, you just need to add a runtimes element indicating that your add-in is going to be having launch event extension points, which means that your add-in is going to be running kind of in the background in certain events. That's why you use the runtimes element here, indicating what are the files that you're adding that have the event handlers of your add-in. And then after you declare that, we have this new extension point that we call launch event. And within launch event, we have basically here's where you subscribe to the events you need. In this case, I am subscribing to all the events that are available. So I'm only using one of them, by the way, but here is where you say, hey, I want to subscribe to the message send or the composing emails or appointments, etc. So, and then, this file that you declare here on the runtimes element, as you can see under resources, if you go down here, you will see that it's pointing to a JavaScript file, and that JavaScript file in this case has the implementation of such events. So, sorry, one more thing in the manifest. As you can see here, we declare the event that I am subscribing and what's the name of the handler. So recipients change, as you can see here, has an on-message recipient change handler. And of course, if I go to commands.js, I will see that effectively there is an on-message recipient change event. And this is where I basically check if the user is internal or external. And then I do an internal, or I insert external or internal signature, right? So it's very straightforward. Moving on, going back to my deck, as I mentioned previously, the runtime. I want to share a bit more details of how the runtime works because we try to do this, optimize this flow. And so basically, what happens here, if you see the time, this chart, this line denotes the time. At T0, when a user creates a new email, you will see that the uncomposed event gets triggered, and basically we add, in this case, a signature to the email. Or you imagine that you can do other actions, but I'm just going to the signatures example here. User creates new email, the signature is inserted, and then at some moment in time, the user starts composing an email. And if this is more than 5 minutes, basically T0 plus 5, if no other events happen, what happens is that our sandbox and your add-in basically shut down. So basically the add-in is no longer using any memory or anything like that, right? However, it's often could happen that after you spend so much time creating a new email that you add more recipients to the email. So what happens if I add new recipients on the email? Basically at T0 plus 5 plus X, what will happen is that we again are going to launch, a JavaScript engine super efficient in the background. So these shutdowns and creation of the runtime, for that you need the session data, right? And this is where the session data makes sense because you can store, different types of metadata you need to have across multiple instantiations of the sandbox, right? So this session state is going to be there, for the lifetime of the composition, which means that if you close the email on compose, that session state is gonna blow away, right? So that is just a brief example of explanation of what you can do with event-based. Eric is going to show you basically a more exciting demo than I did, and it's available, I think, as a pattern and practice. So that's awesome. The second announcement that we made was around smart alerts. I see that there are a few questions here. Can the email signature pull information from AD? Absolutely, they can pull information from AD. Yes. The other question is, does this work in Outlook Online? From George, absolutely. This works right now. In the announcement covers Windows. Thank you for asking that, by the way, and online, and very soon also the Mac, and eventually we'll also have it on the mobile devices. And that's the plan. Okay. So smart alerts. What is a smart alerts? Well, turns out, and I will explain it better with a demo. But this feature it's mostly around. We recently did a research was made in the Outlook team, and we find out very interesting information that users actually really appreciate when we help them, to send better emails. And a quick example of that, let me show you. When you create a new email, right? And for example, let's say that in the body of the email, you refer to a file, right? This is an example that actually is implemented in the product, but it's very relevant because now you can do it with an add-in. So for example, if I check out this picture of my dog. And by the way, I'm going to send it to myself because I don't want to bother Hitesh with this. But basically, what I'm typing here is that I'm referring to a picture that I am not attaching it to the document, no? So basically, when I click on send, what's going to happen here is that, hey, I have this semi-intelligent add-in that is telling me, hey, looks like you are forgetting to include an attachment here, right? So then at this moment, I can choose to send it or don't send it. So basically what happened is that when I send, the email, there was another event that was launched, and I was handling the send event, doing some logic, and then basically halting the send of the email. There are a few options here that I will describe later, but basically, I am sending this message. Hey, it looks like you're forgetting to include an attachment. Okay, so in this case, I would say, okay, yes, that makes total sense. That I add an attachment here, and in this case, effectively, I'm going to add an attachment of my. This is a real picture of my dog, which it's too slow to load. But there you go. I'm here with my dog when he was a puppy. And now, hold on a second. If I remove this attachment, and if I send the email, I have the attachment and it's going to go, right? So that's basically what Smart Alerts is all about. It's about handling the on-send event and then having the capability of either, well, of block, you can potentially block the send of the email, and you can provide either suggestions or you can actually enforce something. So you will be able to say something along the lines of, you're not going to be able to send the email unless you do other tasks, like in scenarios like, for example, classification or other types of important processes. You can halt, you can block the user from actually sending the email, right? So this is nothing new. We ship a feature that is similar to this one, but I will tell you what it has a few downsides, and among others that you cannot use them in the store. But anyways, the coding is exactly the same, because from send, if I go to the manifest, you will see that I have a message sent here event. I have a handler, and then this event specifically has another attribute that it's send mode. Send mode is important because you're able to change how the feature works by using this parameter right here. I will tell you more details about that in a second. If we go back to the deck, so basically one mode of operation is to allow the send. You use this mode in the case you want to provide a recommendation. So like, hey, it seems to be that it will be nice if you add additional content, or you're checking maybe the language of the body, and you say, hey, maybe you should rethink about how you're typing this, and the user can actually make the call if this is a recommendation, so I can send it anyway. So it's not a hard block basically. Your guys are able to customize a few things on this dialog. Obviously, the text that is presented here. Then there is a mode 2 is block the send. You change this in the manifest. And the idea here is that you don't have the send anyway option here. So basically here you want to enforce that the user is doing something before they send the email. In this case, classification is a typical example, that you need to classify the content that you're sending. And in some conditions, this should be enforced. So this is how you do it here, right? Now, the other thing is a long-running operation. So we are one of the design aspects that we want to recommend you guys here is that this should be fast operations. So we don't want to halt the send of the email for too much time. So basically, if you're adding, it's going to be taking, I think it's more than 5 seconds right now. I think that's the telemetry we're getting to see if we need more time or not. But if the add-in is kind of slow, what we're going to we have a long-running operation, then we're basically going to show a dialog like this that indicates that your add-in is doing some processing, so that the user is not kind of surprised at what's going on here, right? So if you see this dialog, that's not a good sign. I mean, you should strive to never show this dialog. But if that's the case, we understand that sometimes when we call services, it could be slow, and then we provide this experience for the user, long-running operations. And then finally, as previously mentioned, we shipped a send event long time ago as part of a 1.8 requirement set. But that had that huge downside that if the add-in for whatever reason wasn't available, then the user was not able to send emails. Because it was that important by the time we shipped this, that with some customers, like, it's okay that the user cannot send emails if the add-in is not available. But we know that that's kind of very heavy-handed. For that reason, add-ins who were implementing on send back then weren't allowed in the store. But now, if the add-in is not available, we are going to allow the user to send the email. But we'll notify them. This is the experience that we want to provide. If the add-in is not available, we will tell the user, and then it's up to the user to basically try it later or to send it anyway, send the email. This is a one-time warning that we're going to send. Okay. And that's basically it. About one more thing. So we think that it's a combination of both features that I mentioned here, event-based add-ins pro smart alerts. One recommendation that we have is don't leave expensive operations until send is clicked. So if you're going to be analyzing attachments, because we have an attachments change event, as you will see later with Eric's demo, we really don't want you to be kind of, if you need to encrypt them, for instance, that's an expensive operation. If you leave all those expensive operations until the end, it's going to be a bad experience because it's going to take time, and the send is going to be halted for maybe too many seconds, right? So what we are recommending is use event-based, for example, in the attachment scenario, to do as much pre-processing as you can. So if you need to encrypt the attachments, you do it using the attachment change event, and you are kind of in the background processing those attachments. So when the time the send comes, you basically already did this pre-processing, and then you're doing the final stages at the time of send, no? The final details, so sort of saying before actually allowing the user to send the email. Right? So we recommend you to use those two technologies to provide the optimal experiences. All right. And with that, I would like to switch gears and switch to Eric. But before I do that, I would like to know if there are any questions here, David, that you think we should answer at this point.
Yeah, there was a few questions in the chat.
Can the event-based add-ins be triggered by a user typing a certain word? Nima is asking this. No, we cannot. We cannot. Right now, we don't have a typed event. We don't have a specific. This is an event that actually, it's a good question. This has never existed for a reason, and the main reason is because that is very expensive. I mean, if you are handling an event every time the user is, key down or key pressed events, they could damage the experience of Outlook in a big way, no? So we don't usually allow those events to happen. But maybe you can in another event you can do this, get entire body and analyze the content. Yes, Eugene. One of the benefits of smart alerts is that we're going to allow these add-ins in the store. Session data needs to be stored centrally, so individual sessions. Where to place the centralized data. Well, session data object it's been asked here, needs to be stored centrally. Well, the session data object, it's actually an in-memory place where you can store data. And again, it's going to be available just for the lifetime of the composition. We are planning to add another similar session data object for the lifetime of the Outlook session, which seems to be what you're asking here, and that's going to come later.
Hey, Juan, I think when you kind of turn away from your mic, you kind of break up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, I will ask I will be replying some of these questions on the chat. I just want to let Eric go ahead with his part of the presentation. Thank you very much for the questions. Very good questions, by the way. Eric, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Juan. Hi, folks. I hope everybody's having a good day. I'm the owner, principal consultant of Eric Legault Consulting, Inc., and I've been doing office development for something like 25 years and building Office or Outlook add-ins for over 20, which is kind of crazy. But we're going to start it off today with a song that I wrote for everybody called about Office add-ins. And let's make sure you turn up your volume. This is going to be a rocking tune. All right, let's crank it up to 11. And hope you enjoy. All right, that was a little loud, I think, right? Did everybody hear that okay? Is everybody awake? All right.
That was awesome. Thank you.
That was fun to make. I had another song planned, but I never got around to doing it. So I am now going to talk about the code sample that I wrote for the that's been published to the Office Dev PnP repo that's currently live. It has been for a couple of weeks now. And feel free to fork it and take a look. This is what I'm going to be talking about today. The sample basically showcases how to use event-based activation in Outlook. When the user composes an email or an appointment or a meeting request, it definitely shows how to run tasks based on events that fire when the user changes certain data, such as when adding an attachment to an email or a meeting request. and when the user adds recipients or distribution lists to an appointment, and or even changes the start date or end date time in an appointment and meeting request. And it also does some demonstrations of how to use notification messages to during some of these events to give some feedback to the user that some code is happening and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing some of my deck here and talk a little bit more about an overview of events that Juan covered it fairly well, but I want to reiterate some of the important things that we have to consider. Historically, we've had, COM add-ins with Visual Studio Tools for Office. Everything's always been available to us, right? Every single event, Outlook is always running, and now for a few years we've had that on-send event, but the user, still has to do some interaction with the thing. But now we have an ultra-efficient JavaScript engine that basically fires as soon as your event is activated, and it has a limited lifetime and a built-in expiration mechanism, so to speak. So it's kind of like quantum fluctuations. They kind of constantly pop up and wink out of existence at the whim of the developer whenever you need it. Now, you're probably wondering, if these events just fire for a limited duration, how do you manage state? And Juan talked about how there's that new session data property bank that we can leverage that lives at the session level. So for as long as that item that you're composing is living, it's in memory and very efficient, and your data can be accessible for that particular event. So, and it also doesn't have some of the size restrictions that you may come across when you're using roaming settings. So what kind of scenarios are we thinking about with a lot of these events that we have available for us? Well, imagine that you need to encrypt some content, right? This is a potential long-running operation that if you do it during the on-send event, there's a huge risk your code's not going to finish before that quota is exceeded. So, and then your add-in is shut down. But now we have the on-message attachments change and on-appointment attachments changed events that will quantum entangle itself right when you need it, right? For as long as you need it, up to about 500 seconds, I believe is the amount. It's 5 minutes. But you don't want your code to be running that long. So now we have, some good scenarios for handling these particular problems. Now, if you want to take advantage of these, there's been some updates since I wrote this deck on the availability of, it's now in the 1.11 requirement set, and it's released general availability. At the time I wrote this, that you had to be in the targeted release channel, but I believe from what I've learned, it is now in monthly release, and in the future it'll be in semi-annual release. So if you want to take advantage of these and you're not in that particular release channel, you may have to adjust your beta library references as necessary, and you can always install the type definition files for TypeScript and whatnot in your developer environment. Now, for Outlook for Windows, you're going to have to also configure the registry if you're not in an appropriate channel. So, and there's a minimum required build, but certainly go back to the configure your Outlook add-in for event-based activation documentation page and Microsoft's website for up-to-date information on what you need to get configured so that you can take advantage of these. So now I'm going to show the add-in sample that I have. All right, we're going to side-by-side mode here. And I'm going to fire up a new email. And I'm simply going to add an attachment that I've added before. And what this code is doing is taking that first attachment and it's encrypting it right away. But it's also adding it as an additional copy so that the developer can see that something, or the user can see that something is happening. And then it's taking that encrypted copy and then decrypting it again and adding it as a third attachment. And you notice that the information bar updated itself as the flow completed. There was actually some progress information bars that the encrypting and decrypting happened so fast that you didn't even notice that particular information bar. But at the end result, there's an information bar that shows up that says that the operations have completed. So that's one example of what you can do with these new events. The other is in your calendar. You can also hook into the on appointment attendees changed event, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Adele Vance here. Nancy DeVolio is not available. I think she left and started a startup. So as you'll see, another information bar it popped up. It gives you a tally of the users that have been added as required or optional recipients. So that can be pretty handy. Just hang on one moment here. I'm going to stop the side-by-side mode because it's blocking my view of the screen. I'm going to go ahead and add an optional one, and you'll see the count increase in the information bar. One optional attendee now. It's even picking up if I add distribution lists. So as a little warning to the user, hey, you're adding a distribution list, please make sure that you're adding the correct one. And you can add more if you like. Engineering, and then it'll increment that count. And as you remove recipients, the counts can decrease as well until you have nothing, and all the information bars will get removed for that one for some reason. So that is a good summary of what the add-in does. It also, of course, as you saw when I opened this, creates an information bar as soon as the message is composed, just for some informational details about how to run this particular sample. And all the meat and potatoes in these examples are controlled by some of the things that Juan had already described, right? We got your manifest has to be configured in the new runtimes element. You have the ability to set some resource IDs for the various URLs for Outlook Online and Outlook for Windows, right? So you want to make sure that the WebView runtime points to the HTML file, and the override for that runtime points to a JavaScript file. And there are some differences between those two that I'll go into at the end of my demo. And further to that is the launch events area. Juan had quite a few events wired up here, and I have the same, maybe a couple fewer, where you're describing the launch event that you want to hook into and the function name where that occurs in your JavaScript file. And in this case, I have it at the bottom of my file where I call the actions.associate method, tell it the name of the handler, and where that function lives in this particular file. So for attachments processing, it's a little involved. The code that I was doing to do this and requires starting it off with getting hooking into the on-item attachments changed handler and then firing a callback when that's completed, which basically processes the type of attachment and make sure that it's a base 64 type of attachment. And then it's going to go on and call the encrypt method in another callback and start decrypting the attachment, adding it, and so forth. So if you want to take a look at the code in my sample, it's relatively well documented, so it'll give you a decent enough idea of what's going on. The overview of this particular flow is kind of iterated through here in this sample slide. So it's a little bit involved for this demo to go through entirely, but it gives you a good idea of what is going on. So that is a good illustration of what these events can do. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing another slide here. Give you some takeaways on what you need to know or what you just saw. So, and again, go back to the main documentation page for event-based activations to make sure that they are up to date. They're currently you can't use event-based activations in add-ins that are deployed to AppSource or the Office Store yet, but please correct me if I'm wrong, David or Juan. And no support for Outlook for Mac yet. And that timeout that I referenced earlier of 300 seconds is one of the major things that you want to ensure that your add-in's code is complete during that time frame, and that you also use the event.completed method when your code is done. That's pretty important. And if you happen to be in a scenario, an edge case scenario, hopefully that a bunch of add-ins the user is using hooks into event-based activation, only 5 can be actively running at a time. So keep an eye out for that and handle it appropriately in your documentation or your developer guidance. And some of the API limitations, there's some blocked Office.js methods. You're not going to be able to do things like authentication. So the get access token methods won't be usable, and anything that operates with forms like displaying a new appointment or a new message form or closing those or interacting with dialogues and message parents and all that. And one of the key limitations that I described earlier when you're referencing in the runtimes element, the fact that you have a different resource ID for Outlook for Windows and Outlook for Online essentially means because in Outlook for Windows we can only reference a JavaScript file, we cannot use an HTML file to load external JavaScript libraries. So you can't have any require statements in the JavaScript file. And in this case, the Crypto.js API that I'm using to encrypt and decrypt attachments is only working in Outlook Online, sorry. And there's also a few limitations with course support. You can only use some of the basic methods. I believe that's get, head, and post, and cookies aren't currently supported, but full course support is coming soon, so keep your eyes posted on that documentation page for all the updates.
Hey, Eric?
Yes?
Can I just say one thing about that slide real quick? So get
Sure.
access token is now supported in event-based activation, and I actually just published some documentation around that just a few weeks ago. So it's a relatively recent thing, but I'll put a link to the docs in case anyone's curious, but that particular one does work.
Perfect. Okay, so that's the meat and potatoes for those examples, and feel free to go to the GitHub repo and take a look at it for yourself. So remember, folks, to fly the flag for Office development, hold it high and proud. And I'm rocking some developer fashion right now. Please step into my office. That's the Office logo there, in case you didn't recognize it. Maybe one of the older versions. Contributions are always welcome. Please hook up with David or Juan if you would like to do your own samples here. Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. Not Karen. Sharing is caring. I think Karen would have something to say about that. If you want to find me online, my handles are Legault or Eric Legault, pretty much for all the social media as outlined in this little square at the bottom on Twitter, GitHub, YouTube. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I'll get some other music videos on there that you might enjoy. And connect with me on LinkedIn and we can chat. And that's it for today. I hope everybody has a great day, and we will see you soon, hopefully. Cheers.
All right. Thank you, Eric. That was awesome. Really enjoyed the video and the sample as well. Okay, so I just wanted to thank our community for all the contributions that they've been generously sending in. Last month, if you weren't on last month's community call, Michał Królewicz from Code2 did a great presentation on their email signature add-in. So go check that out if you haven't seen it. And we thank Code2 and Michał for that, sharing their experience with the Office platform with the community. I want to say thank you to Maarten van Stam, who's been helping with PR reviews on our PnP repo on the samples, especially with some Hello World samples I was recently putting out there. And obviously Eric Legault, who was on today's call, for that great sample we put together. And we really appreciate all this community involvement. It really helps grow the community, make connections, and make everything better for everybody. So if you want to help out the community, definitely go check out the PnP samples repo, which is a link to it there. You can also get your own badge for helping out, which there's a picture of it there. And the link at the bottom will take you to the recognition program if you want to learn more about that badge. So moving along, we had some Q&A come in on our Q&A form that we have out there, which there's a link to that at the end of this slide deck if you have questions for the next community call. So a couple questions came in on Outlook REST API being decommissioned. Specifically, there is a question around mobile support. That first question is kind of asking about, will the Outlook REST API remain active for Exchange Server and just be decommissioned for O365 accounts? And the next question was around the access tokens for Microsoft Graph API. So this decommissioning, does this mean that the Outlook add-ins on mobile will have no way to make Graph API calls without forcing user interaction? Effectively meaning there's no migration path to keep existing functionality. we have with the REST API implementation on mobile add-ins. So first of all, thanks for these questions. We got similar questions last month as well, and we understand that there's many add-ins out there that are relying on the Outlook REST APIs. And the team is working on putting together guidance around this. Obviously, I mean, these are great questions to ask because these all are hitting on the type of guidance that we need to provide. So it's helpful. It's good. People are thinking in this space. So hopefully we'll have that soon. Some specific.
David, if
Yes?
you want me to clarify some things here, if I could.
Yeah.
So the REST decommission. So one thing that you need to keep in mind is that there was a question around, on-prem, right? And, the REST API is not supported in Exchange on-prem unless you're in a hybrid environment. So basically, folks that are in Exchange 2016 and 2019, 100% on-prem shouldn't be impacted by this because that doesn't exist in the first place. And now the plan is that, so one of the things that we're working with the REST team, and this is something that I am trying to see if we can, how can we make it official, is that, keep allowing the folks who are using REST APIs before the decommission date. I think they will be granted exceptions to keep working. So that is something that I am kind of negotiating with the REST team to see if it is possible. And I need to find a way to identify all the add-ins that by the decommission date are using the REST API so we can grant exceptions to it. But going forward, I strongly recommend, that people start moving their, everything is moving to the graph now. So that's the recommendation is that as soon as you can start the move to the graph, the better. We'll provide more updates on this early next year. Thank you, David, for surfacing this question.
Yeah, thank you, Juan, for helping answer that. That's super helpful. And then moving on. By the way, Juan, I think it looked like somebody might have asked a follow-up question on that in the chat. And let's see. So the next question was about the Microsoft Graph SSO documentation. Focuses on calling Graph from server side once an access token is obtained using a bootstrap token. For our add-in, we would prefer to pass that token back to the client and have the add-in initiate the Microsoft Graph calls using the obtained token. Is this not recommended? If so, why not? So in general, passing a token back to the client is going to increase the risk of it getting leaked or stolen by malicious code. So definitely keeping tokens on the server is a more secure way of managing them. These questions come up occasionally. They're like security questions. And, we're the Office add-ins team. We don't really implement the security stuff. That's more the Microsoft Identity Platform team. So I put a link in here. If you're looking for more guidance on what you're trying to do in this space, I'd recommend reaching out to that team. And there's a link here that'll take you to a list of ways you can get assistance from them. But yeah, but I can just answer in general, like it's just more risky if you do that sort of thing. So it's in general recommended not to do that. And next is a question on unit testing. Hi all, I wanted to ask something about unit testing. I created my Office.js add-in for Word that is working with existing documents, and it is blocking or unblocking sections inside a document. As I understand, unit tests that are written in examples are working on a blank document. So my question is it possible to run unit tests on a custom document, and how can we accomplish that? Kind regards. Thank you. So in general, unit tests don't run against an actual document. Unit tests are, as I understand it, they're about isolating a particular function and testing it in isolation from anything else, generally providing mock objects if necessary. So it sounds like this is more like an end-to-end test or maybe UI testing. And so I'm following up with the developer experience team to see if we can provide any additional advice in the Q&A blog summary. I can say we don't have any specific tools for doing this sort of thing, but there might be something we can point you to. So I'll see what I can find out. And that's into the Q&A. I did want to mention there's a link here to an Office add-in developing experience survey. So the PM team has put a survey out there. It's an Office forum survey looking for questions to help inform some planning that they're doing coming up in the next couple of quarters. So it'd be super helpful if anyone can go out there and share their developer experience. It kind of hits across all parts of development through testing and publishing and so on. Let us know what you think. Give us your feedback. It'll be super helpful for the PM team to think about how they want to prioritize and think about features and updates coming down the pipe in the next couple of quarters. So there's a link there. I'll also put it in the blog, and please help us out. Thank you. Now, if you're new to Office add-ins, there's a couple of resources here you can go check out. You can go to our Office documentation at aka.ms/office-add-ins-docs, which you can find all sorts of getting started information, including 5-minute quick starts that you can see on the right side there if you want to just get something up and running and do some exploring. You can also go try out Office scripts at aka.ms/office-scripts-docs and try doing automation using JavaScript as more of a macro kind of like environment. Some developer resources, if you need more information, I definitely recommend checking out the Microsoft 365 Developer Program. That link there will help you sign up for a free Microsoft 365 tenant for purposes of developing and testing, and it's a great way to try out your code in an environment just for that. And there's also Script Lab, which you can run inside the Office applications and try running code from the context of a task pane. It's a nice way just to try things out without having to install a dev environment. There's also, again, the Office add-ins documentation. And if you want to engage with us, you can ask technical questions about the Office JavaScript API. There's a link there for that. Or there's also a link for if you have questions about developing Office add-ins. You can also ask for help at stackoverflow.com. And there's a few tags there that you can use to associate with your question. And if you find something that looks like a bug in the product, please let us know at github.com/officedev/office-js, and we'll look into that. And if you have any feature requests or ideas, there's a link there for feature requests, or you can go there and browse through them and upvote them and so on if you want. And of course, you can always send a smile or frown from inside Office itself. This isn't the only developer community call. There's several other Microsoft 365 developer community calls. There's the Microsoft 365 platform call, which is weekly. Adaptive cards, Microsoft Identity Platform, Office add-ins is us, of course. So if these are interesting, any of these areas are interesting, you definitely go check them out. Any of the links there will take you to more information about them and help you find the time and date for the next upcoming calls. The recording of this call will be available in 24 hours on the Microsoft 365 Community YouTube channel. And I'm going to check out that. It looked like somebody was asking about the slides. The slides get posted with the blog, as I recall. So the recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. And the next call will be coming up on January 12th at 8 a.m. PST. And you can get the link to the community call with that aka.ms/office add-ins community call, all one word. If you want to see the agenda, I've been working to get that published about a week before the call comes up. And there's a link there that will take you to an article that tracks all of the previous calls as well as the upcoming agenda. So keep an eye on that if you want to find out what the agenda is. By the way, I appreciate the feedback folks gave us recently. That's why I added that. And you can also submit your questions to aka.ms/office add-ins form if you want to send in any questions, and we'll work to answer those on the next community call. So just want to say thank you, everyone, for attending the call. Hope you have a great week. And it looked like there might have been a few questions. I'll go through the chat here and just see what's in there and follow up on those. And we will see you on the next call. Thanks, everyone.